The gavel hit the wood like a gunshot. Motion granted. Those 2 words echoed through the courtroom, and I felt my entire world collapse for the 5th time in 8 months. 5 times. 5 delays. 5 excuses. All because of one man sitting across from me, smirking like he'd already won. My father. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. I couldn't breathe. The air conditioning was blasting, but sweat was beading along my hairline. My chest tightened like someone was squeezing my ribcage with both hands. This wasn't just a legal battle. This was personal. This was my mother's legacy being torn apart, piece by piece, by the man who destroyed her life once before. Let me back up. My name is Emma Clark. I'm 29 years old, a public defender in Seattle, and 8 months ago, my mother passed away after a brutal battle with cancer. She left me a modest inheritance, nothing extravagant. $85,000 in savings. A small 2-bedroom townhouse in Tacoma where she rebuilt her life after the divorce. And an antique oak chest that had been in her family for 4 generations. That's it. That's all she had. But my father, Richard Clark, wanted it all. Not because he needed the money. No, Richard Clark was a successful corporate tax attorney with a lake house, a new wife, and more money than he knew what to do with. He wanted it because he couldn't stand the idea of my mother having the last word, even in death. I watched him lean over to his lawyer, Marcus Hayes, whispering something that made both of them chuckle. That smirk, that arrogant, entitled smirk that I'd seen my entire childhood whenever he got his way. My pulse was hammering in my ears. "Your Honor," my father said, standing with this practiced concern that made me want to scream. "We request additional time to review Mrs. Clark's medical records. There are inconsistencies regarding her treatment decisions that may impact the distribution of assets. Assets, that's what my mother had been reduced to." A line item on a spreadsheet. Sophia Morgan, my attorney and one of my closest friends from law school, shot to her feet. "Mr. Clark, this is the 5th such request. Ms. Clark has provided complete medical records twice already." Judge Anderson barely looked up from his papers. "The court will allow Mr. Clark additional time. Just like that. No questions." No scrutiny. Just another delay. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout that this was a farce, that my father was manipulating the system, that something wasn't right about how this judge kept ruling in his favor. But I didn't, because I'd learned early on that emotional outbursts don't win cases. They make you look unstable, untrustworthy. So I sat there, silent, while my father walked out of that courtroom looking like he'd just won the lottery. Sophia squeezed my hand under the table. "Don't let him see he's getting to you. That's what he wants, but it was too late." He already knew. After the hearing, Sophia and I walked to the parking garage in silence. Our footsteps echoed off the concrete walls as we weaved between cars. Finally, when we were far enough from the courthouse, she turned to me. "This isn't normal, Emma." I unlocked my beat-up Honda and tossed my briefcase onto the passenger seat. "I know it's not normal, but what can we do? The judge keeps ruling in his favor. That's what I mean." Sophia leaned against my car door, her voice dropping. "I've been making calls, talking to other lawyers who practice before Judge Anderson. They all say the same thing. He doesn't usually behave this way. Something about your case is different." I stared at her. "Different how?" "I don't know yet. But I will find out." My phone vibrated in my pocket. Unknown number. Virginia area code. I almost declined it, but something made me answer. "Is this Emma Clark?" The voice was unfamiliar. Female. Authoritative. "Yes? Who's calling?" "My name is Rebecca Walsh. I knew your mother years ago. I heard about the case through some old contacts." I glanced at Sophia, mouthing, "Who is it?" She shrugged. "I'm sorry. How did you know my mother?" "I worked with Lauren in the Air Force before she met your father." My breath caught. The Air Force? My mother had never talked much about her time in the military. She always said she'd done office work for 4 years before going to college, where she met my father. Nothing dramatic, nothing significant. Your mother kept things from that time, Rebecca continued, her voice lowering. Things that matter now, things that might help you understand what's happening with your inheritance. My heart was racing. "What things?" "Not over the phone. Can we meet tomorrow?" Somewhere private? I hesitated. This could be a trap, a scam, but something in her voice felt genuine. "I'll text you an address," Rebecca said, before I could respond. "Noon tomorrow. Come alone," she hung up. Sophia was watching me carefully. "What was that about?" I stared at my phone, my mind spinning. I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation with Rebecca. The Air Force, my mother's past, things that matter now. What did she mean? And why did I have this sick feeling in my stomach that whatever I was about to discover would change everything? The cafe was quiet when I arrived 15 minutes early. I sat at a corner table, scanning every person who walked through the door, not knowing what to expect. At exactly noon, a woman in her mid-50s walked in. Silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a neat bun, sharp gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She didn't look around searching for me. She walked straight to my table. Emma Clark. Not a question. A statement. I stood, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "You knew my mother?" I did. She sat down, ordered black coffee from the server, then waited until we were alone. Her hands rested flat on the table. No fidgeting, no unnecessary movement. And then she said something that turned my entire world upside down. "Your mother wasn't just an office clerk in the Air Force, Emma. She was signals intelligence. One of the best. She worked on Operation Winter Dawn, a classified surveillance program in the late 90s. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's not possible. She told me she did admin work. That was her cover." Rebecca's eyes softened. "She couldn't tell you because of confidentiality agreements. And later, because of what happened." "What happened?" Rebecca leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your father and Judge Anderson both served as young legal advisors on the same project. JAG officers reviewing surveillance parameters. They didn't just review it, Emma. They expanded it. They used classified information for personal gain, for leverage, for influence." My stomach twisted. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying your father used his connections to rig the divorce settlement against your mother 14 years ago. Judge Anderson was deliberately assigned to her case through backroom manipulation. And now he's doing the same thing with your inheritance case." The cafe noise faded into a distant hum. I couldn't process what I was hearing. "There were others," Rebecca continued. "A civilian activist named Daniel Pierce. His death was ruled an accident, but your mother knew better. She documented everything, but she couldn't prove it. I felt sick. Why are you telling me this now?" Rebecca reached into her bag and slid a small, worn notebook across the table. "Don't open this here. But when you do, the phrase Winter Dawn was your mother's internal verification code. Check her oak chest. There might be something there that confirms what I'm telling you." I stared at the notebook like it might explode. Was my mother being blackmailed? Rebecca's expression answered before her words did. "Not with money, with safety. Your safety specifically." My breath hitched. All those years. All those cryptic warnings my mother gave me about powerful men and corrupt systems. I thought she was just bitter about the divorce. But she wasn't bitter. She was terrified. I left the cafe in a daze, clutching the notebook like a lifeline. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my car. Back at Sophia's office, I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with every word. When I finished, she turned her laptop toward me. "Your father filed a motion yesterday specifically about the oak chest. He's claiming sentimental value, but the language is strange. He's fixated on it." I leaned forward, reading the legal document. "He doesn't care about the money. He's scared of what's inside that chest." Sophia nodded slowly. "If what Rebecca told you is true, then we're not just dealing with an inheritance dispute. We're dealing with corruption, blackmail, maybe worse." I thought about Judge Anderson, his dismissive glances, the way he tilted his head whenever my father spoke, the pattern of rulings that made no legal sense. "They're protecting themselves," I said quietly. "My father and the judge. They're willing to destroy my mother's legacy to keep their secrets buried." Sophia closed her laptop. "These men have everything to lose, Emma. That makes them dangerous." I looked down at the notebook Rebecca had given me. My mother's handwriting, her secrets, her truth. "Then we need to be smarter," I said. "We need evidence. Real evidence." That night, I stood in front of my mother's oak chest. The one thing my father wanted more than anything else. I ran my fingers over the intricate rose carvings on the lid, remembering something my mother had written in a birthday card 3 years ago. Always look beneath the roses, where true beauty hides. At the time, I thought it was just poetic nonsense. But now, I pressed my fingernail into the gap between the wood panels near one of the roses. A soft click echoed through the room. My breath stopped. A hidden compartment slid open at the bottom of the chest. "No way," I whispered. Inside was a manila envelope, yellowed with age. My hands trembled as I pulled it out and opened it. Photographs spilled onto my lap. Black and white images of 2 young men in military uniforms standing beside surveillance equipment. I recognized my father immediately, even 30 years younger, and beside him stood Richard Anderson, now Judge Anderson, their arms draped casually over each other's shoulders. Behind the photos was a leather-bound journal. My mother's handwriting filled every page. I flipped through the entries, my heart pounding. June 12, 1996, monitored Senator Gardner's daughter again today, using her to pressure him on the defense bill. This crosses every line. August 4th, 1996, Daniel Pierce threatened to go public. They called it an unfortunate accident when his car went off the road. I know what I saw in the logs. December 18, 1996, Richard received his promotion today, 3 weeks after the Gardner surveillance operation. No coincidence. Tears blurred my vision as I read page after page. My mother had documented everything. Names, dates, locations, evidence of surveillance abuse, manipulation, corruption. She'd known exactly what she was doing. She'd built a case against them from beyond the grave. "You made sure I'd have what I needed," I whispered to her photo on my nightstand. For the first time since her death, I didn't feel powerless. I felt armed. The law offices of Clark, Patterson and Hayes occupied the 32nd floor of a downtown high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed Seattle's skyline like my father had purchased it for decoration. His secretary tried to stop me at the desk. "Miss Clark, you need an appointment." I walked right past her. "He'll see me." My father looked up from his computer as I entered his office, annoyance flashing across his face. "Emma, I'm preparing for a meeting. This won't take long." I closed the door behind me, but I left it slightly ajar. Witnesses nearby, but privacy for what came next. I placed one photograph on his desk. Just one. The rest were locked safely in Sophia's office vault. My father glanced down. His face went pale. His hand trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of his mahogany desk. "I found Mom's journal," I said, watching every micro-expression. "And her photos from Operation Winter Dawn." His eyes widened. Just for a second. "But it was enough. Confirmation." "Where did you get this?" His voice had lost its commanding tone. "Mom kept records, photos, journals, detailed accounts of what you and Judge Anderson did during your time in the military." I leaned forward. "You're not fighting for $85,000, Dad. You're trying to hide this." He stood, towering over me the way he used to when I was a child. "You have no idea what you're playing with. These matters were classified. National security." Was Daniel Pierce's death national security too? His jaw clenched. "Direct hit. Drop the case by Friday," I said, picking up the photo. "Or I'll request Judge Anderson's recusal with these as exhibits." "Public record." "You're making a mistake." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, but I didn't flinch. "No, Dad, you made the mistake 30 years ago, and Mom made sure I'd have the proof." I walked toward the door, feeling his glare burning into my back. "Friday," I repeated. Back in Sophia's apartment that evening, we sat surrounded by takeout containers and legal documents spread across her coffee table. "You recorded the conversation, right?" Sophia asked. I pulled out my phone. "Every word. We listened to the playback." My father's reaction. His threats. His admission that the matters were classified. "This is good," Sophia said. "Really good." He practically confirmed everything. Rebecca, who joined us after my text, studied my mother's journal again. "These dates match exactly what I remember. The Gardner surveillance, Daniel Pierce's accident, the security clearance adjustments." She pointed to a specific entry. This note about the defense bill vote, that happened exactly as Lauren described. My phone buzzed. A text from Travis Kent, the retired Major Rebecca had connected me with. Just reviewed the evidence. Matches what I witnessed. I'll testify if needed. We have allies, I told them, showing the message. Sophia nodded. And I have another one. Joyce, the court clerk, noticed irregularities in how your case has been handled. She's willing to sign an affidavit. I leaned back against the couch, overwhelmed by how quickly the momentum had shifted. For months, I'd felt powerless against my father's influence. Now I had evidence, allies, leverage. My mother had made sure of it. So what's our next move? Rebecca asked. I looked at the calendar. Friday was 2 days away. We wait, I said. We wait and see if my father takes the exit I gave him. If not, Sophia prompted. Then we go nuclear. Monday morning arrived like a thunderstorm. Marcus Hayes, my father's attorney, called at 7:30 a.m., his voice carrying an urgency I'd never heard before. Miss Clark, my client would like to schedule an immediate settlement conference. Today, if possible. I almost dropped my coffee mug. After months of aggressive delays, this sudden reversal felt wrong. Why the rush? I asked, putting the call on speaker so Sophia could hear. My client believes this has gone on long enough. He's prepared to withdraw all objections to the inheritance. Sophia scribbled a note. Don't agree to anything yet. We can meet at my attorney's office at noon, I said carefully. Sophia Morgan will accompany me. Of course. 3 hours later, we sat across from Marcus Hayes in his plush downtown office. The view of Puget Sound stretched behind him, a calculated power move my father didn't attend. Another strategic choice. Let's be direct, Marcus began, sliding documents across the polished table. Richard is prepared to drop all claims against your mother's estate. You receive the full inheritance as originally stipulated. The savings, the townhouse, everything. I scanned the paperwork, searching for the trap. Sophia leaned forward. What's the catch? Marcus adjusted his tie. All he asks is that you relinquish the antique oak chest and its contents. A family heirloom from his side, as you know. There it was. The chest. The chest belonged to my mother for 20 years after the divorce, I said evenly. He never wanted it before. My client has had time to reflect on family heritage. The chest has sentimental value. No, I said flatly. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Frustration. Maybe fear. Very well. He reached for another document. Richard is willing to compromise further. Keep the chest itself, but turn over the journal and photographs inside. That's all. My pulse quickened. They knew about the journal, which meant they knew exactly what it contained. Additionally, Marcus continued, sliding another paper forward, Richard is prepared to offer a substantial financial settlement beyond the inheritance. $200,000. The number hit me like a punch. $200,000. My public defender salary barely covered rent and student loans. That money would change my life, pay off my debt. Give me breathing room. This settlement would end your financial worries, Marcus pressed. You could finally build the life you deserve. Sophia stayed silent beside me, giving me space to decide. The offer dangled in front of me like forbidden fruit. I should mention, Marcus added casually, this offer expires at end of business today. Richard wants this resolved immediately. Back at Sophia's office, I paced while she reviewed the settlement papers. It's your decision, Emma, she said finally. You've already achieved your original goal. The house, the savings, it's all yours under this agreement. But at what cost? I stopped pacing. If I hand over that journal, what happens to the truth? What about the other victims? Sophia set the papers down. There's no guarantee we'll win if we fight this. The settlement is a sure thing. I thought about my mother, about the 16-year-old girl standing in our kitchen when Mom told me Dad wouldn't be coming home. About watching her work part-time at the library while he bought a lake house with his new wife. About her final words to me in hospice. Don't let him take this too. Emma, promise me. If I settle, I said slowly, I get the money. But I abandon any chance at justice. For Mom, for Daniel Pierce, for anyone else they hurt. The stress will continue if you refuse, Sophia pointed out. This battle could go on for years. I stared at the settlement papers. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Take the money and disappear. Last warning, I showed it to Sophia. They're scared, she said. That's why they're threatening you. I made my decision. I grabbed my phone and called Marcus Hayes. Miss Clark, he answered smoothly. Have you made your decision? I have. Tell my father I'm not interested in being bought off like the others. A pause. You're making a serious mistake. I'll take my chances. I hung up. Sophia looked at me with something like pride. Your mother would be proud. Maybe, I said. But that's not why I'm doing it. I picked up my mother's journal, feeling its weight in my hands. I'm doing it because it's right. 1 week after I rejected the settlement, we transformed Sophia's conference room into a war room. Documents covered every surface. My mother's journal lay open beside tax records, photographs, and the sworn affidavit from Major Travis Kent. We have everything we need, Sophia said, organizing evidence into precise stacks. The ethics violations against Judge Anderson are irrefutable. His relationship with your father during Winter Dawn, the pattern of biased rulings, the financial connections, it's all here. Rebecca reviewed her prepared statement. I've written this context brief explaining Winter Dawn's structure without breaching security protocols. It establishes their connection without revealing classified operations. Travis Kent, still carrying his military bearing despite retirement, reviewed his affidavit one final time. I've corroborated the key elements from Lauren's journal. The meetings between Richard and Anderson during the project, their unauthorized access to surveillance data, everything that matters. Now we craft the narrative, Sophia said, pulling up a presentation. Judicial ethics violations, plain and simple. No classified details, just a judge who failed to disclose massive conflicts of interest. I practiced my responses, the ones we'd rehearsed for hours. When Judge Thompson asks about their relationship, I'll explain that my father and Judge Anderson worked together on a government contract, maintained financial connections for decades, and deliberately concealed this history throughout my mother's divorce and now my inheritance case. Sophia smiled. Perfect, direct, factual, compelling. The office door swung open without warning. My father stood in the doorway. He looked broken. Richard Clark, always impeccably dressed, looked disheveled. His tie was askew. He'd lost weight. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. You have no idea what you're risking, he said, his voice raw. This needs to stop, Emma. Sophia stepped between us. Mr. Clark, you're not welcome here. Any communication should go through proper channels. He ignored her, his gaze fixed on me. This isn't just about your mother's inheritance anymore. You're playing with fire. I studied him. For the first time since this battle began, I saw genuine fear behind his anger. Your concern is noted, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. But I'm not backing down. Security escorted him out moments later. After he left, Sophia checked her phone. Judge Anderson has canceled 3 hearings this week, citing health concerns. My sources say his law clerk quit yesterday. They're panicking, I said. Good, Rebecca added. Panic leads to mistakes. That evening, Sophia received an urgent message. Emergency hearing tomorrow, she told me over the phone. Judge Thompson is reviewing a motion for temporary information suppression filed by your father's team. Already? My stomach dropped. We're not ready. We don't have a choice. We present what we have and hope it's enough. The next morning, rain hammered against the courthouse windows as we arrived. The hallways buzzed with the usual chaos of a Monday docket, but our case felt different. Weighted. Sophia carried our evidence binders. I carried my mother's journal, wrapped carefully in protective plastic. Marcus Hayes approached us outside the courtroom. Final offer, he said quietly, handing me an envelope. $500,000. You sign an NDA. This ends today. $500,000. I didn't even open the envelope. No, his jaw tightened. You're going to regret this. Maybe. But at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Inside the courtroom, Judge Emily Thompson presided with the sharp attention of someone who'd done her homework. She reviewed our motion for Judge Anderson's recusal with careful deliberation. Marcus stood. Your Honor, these allegations involve sensitive matters that could compromise national security if aired publicly. We request the proceedings be sealed. Judge Thompson looked up over her reading glasses. I need specifics, Mr. Hayes. What exactly are we discussing that implicates national security? Sophia rose smoothly. Your Honor, we have documented evidence of ex parte communications between opposing counsel, Mr. Clark, and Judge Anderson. These communications occurred outside proper channels and directly influenced rulings in this case. Marcus tried to interrupt, but Judge Thompson raised her hand. Additionally, Sophia continued, we have evidence that Judge Anderson has handled Mr. Clark's personal tax matters for the past 3 years while presiding over this case. A clear conflict of interest that was never disclosed. She slid the evidence folder forward. Judge Thompson reviewed the documents, her expression growing more severe with each page. Bank records showing payments from my father's firm to Judge Anderson's private consulting business. Emails discussing tax strategies. Meeting records during the pendency of our case. These are serious allegations, Judge Thompson said finally. Marcus stood again. Your Honor, the court will hear the full recusal motion without sealing the record, Judge Thompson announced. Mr. Hayes, please inform Judge Anderson that his presence is requested immediately. The bailiff left to fetch him. The minutes stretched like hours. Finally, the door opened. Judge Anderson entered. His usual commanding presence diminished. His face was ashen. His hands trembled slightly as he took a seat. Judge Anderson, Judge Thompson began, I'm reviewing a motion for your recusal in the matter of the Clark estate. The allegations suggest significant conflicts of interest and improper ex parte communications. How do you respond? He cleared his throat. Your Honor, while I maintain there are no direct conflicts that would necessitate... I stood. My chair scraped against the floor. Every eye in the courtroom turned to me. Winter Dawn, I said clearly. Operation Winter Dawn. The room fell silent. My father half rose from his seat, panic flashing across his face before he could control it. Judge Anderson froze, his knuckles white where he gripped the armrest. Your Honor, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. My mother documented everything before her death. She served in signals intelligence during Operation Winter Dawn, not as an office clerk as my father always claimed. Miss Clark, Marcus interrupted, this is highly inappropriate. I'm prepared to submit this evidence to the Judicial Ethics Committee, I pressed on, addressing Judge Thompson. But I believe Judge Anderson understands exactly what these documents contain. A man rose from the back of the courtroom, Travis Kent, in his dress uniform, every inch the retired military officer. Your Honor, I'm Major Travis Kent, retired. I was present during Operation Winter Dawn. I can verify the authenticity of the documents Miss Clark references. The courtroom stilled completely. This was no longer a simple probate dispute. This was something that would be discussed in legal circles for years, Your Honor, I said, meeting Judge Anderson's eyes across the room. We don't seek to harm national security. We seek justice for my mother, whose final wishes have been obstructed. Through improper influence between these two men, Judge Anderson stared at his hands for a long moment, then he raised his head. This court will grant the motion for recusal, he said quietly. I hereby recuse myself from all matters pertaining to the estate of Lauren Clark and order the case reassigned. To Judge Emily Thompson, the court clerk's mouth dropped open. My father slumped back in his chair, the fight draining from him visibly. Your Honor, Marcus said weakly, we request an immediate recess to reassess our position. Judge Thompson nodded. 30 minutes. In the hallway during recess, my father approached me. He looked 10 years older than he had a month ago. You have no idea what you're doing, he whispered, close enough that only I could hear. I looked into his eyes so similar to my own, and felt nothing but resolve. I know exactly what I'm doing, Dad. Drop the case. Issue a public apology for questioning Mom's competence. And this goes no further. He searched my face, perhaps looking for the little girl who once worshipped him. Instead, he found my mother's determination staring back. You're making a mistake, he said, but the threat sounded hollow now. No, the mistake was thinking Mom wouldn't protect herself. She knew you'd come after her estate. She prepared for this. The power dynamic between us shifted like tectonic plates. For the first time in my life, I watched my father back down. That afternoon, Marcus filed a notice of voluntary dismissal. We returned to Judge Thompson's courtroom as she reviewed the case. History with evident skepticism. See numerous procedural irregularities in the previous hearings, she noted, flipping through the file. Given the voluntary dismissal and my review of the original will and medical records, the court finds that Lauren Clark was of sound mind when executing her will. The estate shall be distributed according to her wishes. Relief washed through me like a wave. 8 months of fighting, 8 months of watching my mother's dignity questioned. Finally over. Additionally, Judge Thompson continued, Judge Anderson has formally recused himself from all matters related to the Clark family, and I'm forwarding this case file to the Judicial Ethics Committee for further review. Outside the courthouse, a reporter from the legal newspaper tried to approach us. Miss Clark, can you comment on this unusual resolution? There are rumors about classified information and judicial misconduct. This was about honoring my mother's wishes, I said simply. Nothing more. As the reporter left, Joyce, the court clerk who'd helped us, passed by with an armful of files. She paused beside me. I filed an internal report about the irregularities I noticed, she said quietly. What happened wasn't right. Others should know. Sophia squeezed my arm. We won. Completely. I nodded, thinking of my father's statement released minutes earlier. I withdraw any suggestion that my former wife was impaired when creating her will. I apologize for the distress this legal action has caused my daughter. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time since my mother's death, I let myself cry, not from grief, from relief. 2 days later, the letter arrived on official letterhead, internal review of all cases handled by Richard Clark. I smoothed the paper on my kitchen counter, rereading the words pending investigation and professional conduct concerns. Judge Anderson's medical leave had been announced the previous day. The Judicial Review Board's interest in his case history wasn't mentioned publicly, but Rebecca's contacts confirmed it was happening. 3 other attorneys called me that week. Each hesitantly described patterns they'd noticed in Anderson's courtroom when my father appeared before him. Ms. Clark? A reporter's voicemail played. We're doing a piece on Judge Anderson's unusual recusal. Would you care to comment? I deleted it without responding. Some victories deserve privacy. Sophia arrived with coffee and a genuine smile. Your mother built the perfect case from beyond the grave, she said. Setting cups on my counter. Meticulous evidence. Perfect timeline. She always was thorough. The executor's release form sat in front of me. Full access to everything. No restrictions. The oak chest now lived in my apartment, its brass hardware gleaming in the afternoon light. That night, I stayed in my mother's townhouse for the first time since winning. Her watercolor landscape still hung on the walls. Her reading chair sat by the window. Waiting for morning light, I curled under her quilt and felt wrapped in her protection, the protection she'd maintained all along. Without me knowing, Rebecca and Travis visited the following weekend with old photographs and stories. From my mother's military days, Lauren never talked about what happened because she was protecting you, Rebecca said gently. Your mother would be proud of how you handled this. Travis nodded. She fought with documentation and patience. You did exactly the same. I looked at the photo Rebecca had given me, Mom in her Air Force uniform, young and confident, eyes bright with purpose. She taught me well, I said softly. 6 months passed. I continued working as a public defender, but something fundamental had changed inside me. I stood taller in courtrooms now, challenged improper rulings with precision rather than frustration. When Judge Martinez tried to rush through a questionable warrant, I cited 3 precedents and requested proper review without a hint of uncertainty in my voice. The framed photo of my mother sat on my desk at work, not the funeral portrait, but the Air Force photo, young, strong, determined. Beside it lay her leather journal, its most critical entries carefully preserved and redacted before submission to the Ethics Committee. I started mentoring first-year public defenders. Document everything, I told them. Preparation is power. My father lost his partnership after his firm's internal review. We passed each other occasionally in courthouse hallways. Our exchanges were brief, civil. The rage that once consumed me had cooled into something calmer. The satisfaction of truth finally acknowledged. The Washington State Bar Association invited me to speak at their spring conference about judicial accountability. I titled my presentation, Methodical Justice, When Process Protects Truth. Mom would have appreciated the careful wording. The townhouse in Tacoma no longer felt like a battleground. I'd arranged her books on shelves, displayed her photographs, placed her favorite blue ceramic vase where sunlight caught it each afternoon. The oak chest sat in the living room, no longer holding secrets but filled with family photos, her military commendations, and the mementos I'd rediscovered. Last month, a young woman came to my office with a familiar story, a judge with connections to opposing counsel, rulings that defied logic, procedural delays without merit. Instead of just sympathizing, I pulled out a fresh legal pad. "Tell me every detail," I said. "We're going to document the pattern." I showed her how to file for judicial review, how to request specific documents through properly worded motions, how to build a case methodically rather than emotionally. Sometimes justice requires patience and preparation, I explained, hearing my mother's wisdom in my own words. The Lauren Clark Integrity Fund launched with $35,000 from my inheritance. The Lauren Clark Integrity Fund started small, just me, Sophia, and a rented office space above a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. But within 3 months, we'd received 47 requests for assistance. 47 people who'd faced the same corruption my mother and I had endured. I sat across from Maria Gonzalez, a single mother who'd lost custody of her daughter in a case presided over by Judge Anderson. Her hands shook as she showed me the court documents. "The judge ruled against me every single time," she said, tears streaming down her face. "My ex-husband's attorney is from your father's firm. I couldn't understand why everything kept going wrong." I took her hands in mine. "You're not alone anymore. We're going to review every ruling, every motion, every decision." Sophia worked late into the night, cross-referencing Anderson's cases with attorneys from my father's firm. The pattern was undeniable, systematic, calculated. "Emma, look at this." She turned her laptop toward me. 18 cases in the past 5 years, all involving attorneys from Clark, Patterson, and Hayes, all ruled in their favor despite questionable legal grounds. I felt sick. "How many families did they destroy?" I whispered. Rebecca, who now volunteered with the fund, studied the data. "Your mother suspected this went beyond her own case. That's why she documented everything so carefully. She knew others were being hurt." We filed a comprehensive complaint with the State Bar Association, detailing every case, every connection, every suspicious ruling. The local news picked up the story 3 weeks later. "Former judge under investigation for pattern of bias," read the headline. My phone didn't stop ringing. One evening, I received a call from an unexpected source. "Emma Clark?" The voice was older, raspy. "My name is Catherine Pierce. My son was Daniel Pierce." My breath caught. Daniel Pierce, the activist mentioned in my mother's journal. The accident that was never properly investigated. "Mrs. Pierce, I know what your mother documented," she interrupted gently. "Rebecca Walsh contacted me. I've waited 28 years for someone to tell the truth about what happened to my son." We met at a small diner on the outskirts of Seattle. Catherine was in her 70s, but her eyes held the same fierce determination I'd seen in my own reflection. She placed an old photograph on the table. A young man with kind eyes and an activist's passion. "Daniel was going to expose the surveillance abuses," she said. "He told me he had proof, evidence of illegal targeting. Then his car went off the road on a clear, dry night. The police called it driver error," her voice cracked. "But Daniel was the most careful driver I'd ever known. He never drank, never sped. And the brake lines in his car? The investigators' report said they showed signs of tampering, but that detail disappeared from the final report." I pulled out my mother's journal, opening to the entry dated August 4th, 1996. Daniel Pierce threatened to go public. They called it an unfortunate accident when his car went off the road. I know what I saw in the logs. Catherine read it with trembling hands. Then she looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. Your mother knew. She knew and she tried to document it. She did more than that, I said softly. She made sure that someday someone would listen. The following week, we held a press conference. Sophia stood beside me as I addressed the cameras. Rebecca and Travis flanked us in a show of support. Catherine Pierce sat in the front row, holding her son's photograph. My mother, Lauren Clark, served her country with honor, I began, my voice steady. She witnessed corruption and abuse of power, and when she tried to speak up, she was silenced, threatened, forced to carry secrets that protected the guilty at the expense of the innocent. I held up the leather journal, but she never stopped fighting. She documented everything, every meeting, every suspicious decision, every life destroyed by men who believed they were above accountability. The cameras flashed. Today, we're announcing a formal petition for the State Attorney General to investigate not just one case, but a pattern of judicial misconduct spanning nearly 3 decades. We're calling for a complete review of every case handled by Judge Richard Anderson, where attorneys from Clark, Patterson and Hayes represented parties before him. I looked directly into the camera, and we're demanding answers about the death of Daniel Pierce, an activist who died under suspicious circumstances after threatening to expose surveillance abuses in 1996. The press conference exploded with questions. Miss Clark, are you alleging murder? I'm alleging a cover-up, I said firmly. And I have evidence to support it. That night, as I sat in my apartment going through more of my mother's documents, I found something I'd missed before. A letter. Addressed to me, dated 3 weeks before she died. My hands shook as I opened it. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've found what I left for you. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I was alive. I'm sorry I had to carry these secrets alone for so long. But I want you to know, every choice I made was to protect you. When your father threatened to destroy my life, I stayed silent. When Judge Anderson manipulated my divorce case, I didn't fight back. Not because I was weak, but because they made it clear that if I spoke up, you would suffer the consequences. I watched them destroy Daniel Pierce. I couldn't let them do the same to you, but I also couldn't let them win forever. So I documented everything. I kept every piece of evidence. I made sure that when the time was right, when you were strong enough, brave enough, protected enough, you would have the tools to finish what I started. You are so much stronger than you know, Emma. You have my determination and a moral compass I sometimes lost sight of during those dark years. I know you'll do what's right, not just for me, but for everyone who's been hurt by powerful men who think they're untouchable. I'm so proud of you. I always have been. Fight for the truth, sweetheart. Fight for justice, but most importantly, fight for yourself and the life you deserve. All my love. Mom, I pressed the letter to my chest and cried until I had no tears left. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. The State Attorney General assigned a special prosecutor within 2 weeks. The media coverage intensified. Attorneys who'd noticed Anderson's bias but stayed silent came forward with their own stories. My father's law firm issued a statement distancing themselves from him. Mr. Clark's actions were undertaken without the knowledge or consent of the partnership. We are cooperating fully with all investigations. Translation: they were throwing him under the bus to save themselves. Judge Anderson resigned from the bench rather than face formal hearings. His statement was brief, clinical, and utterly devoid of remorse. In light of recent allegations, I believe it's in the best interest of the court system that I step down. I maintain that I acted in good faith throughout my career. Good faith. I wanted to scream. 6 months after the press conference, the special prosecutor announced charges, not murder charges for Daniel Pierce. The evidence was too old, too circumstantial, despite Catherine's hopes. But fraud charges, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit wire fraud through misuse of government surveillance systems. My father and Judge Anderson were both named. The trial date was set for the following spring. Sophia called me the moment the news broke. We did it, Emma. We actually did it. I sat in my mother's townhouse, surrounded by her books and her memories. and felt the weight of the past 2 years finally lift from my shoulders. "No," I said softly. "Mom did it. We just finished what she started." That evening, I visited my mother's grave. The autumn leaves had turned brilliant shades of orange and gold. The air was crisp and clean. I placed fresh flowers beside her headstone and sat down on the grass beside her. "They're going to face trial, Mom," I said aloud, not caring if anyone heard me. "Dad and Judge Anderson, for what they did to you, to Daniel, to all of those families." A breeze rustled through the trees. "Catherine Pierce came to your grave last week. She left flowers and a note thanking you for documenting what happened to her son. She said Daniel would be proud that you never gave up." I traced my fingers over the engraving on her headstone. "I started the fund in your name. We've helped 23 families so far, people who were facing the same corruption you faced. We're teaching them how to fight back, how to document, how to be methodical and patient and strategic." The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cemetery. "I'm not angry anymore," I admitted. "I thought I'd feel vindicated when they were charged, triumphant. But mostly I just feel sad. Sad that Dad chose power over integrity. Sad that you had to live with those secrets for so many years. Sad that it took your death for the truth to finally come out." I wiped tears from my cheeks, but I'm also grateful. Grateful that you taught me to fight. Grateful that you documented everything so carefully. Grateful that you loved me enough to protect me. Even when it cost you everything, I stood up. Brushing grass from my jeans, I promise I'll keep fighting. Mom, not just for you, but for everyone who needs someone in their corner. Everyone who's facing a rigged system and thinks they're alone. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "My name is Jennifer Walsh. My custody case was handled by Judge Anderson 3 years ago. I just heard about your fund. Can you help me?" I smiled through my tears. "Yes," I texted back. "We can help." The trial began on a cold morning in March. The courthouse steps were packed with reporters, cameras, and protesters holding signs that read, "Justice for Daniel Pierce" and "Hold judges accountable." I walked through the crowd with Sophia on one side and Catherine Pierce on the other. Rebecca and Travis followed close behind. Inside the courtroom, I took my seat in the gallery. My father sat at the defense table with his new attorney, not Marcus Hayes, who'd quietly resigned from the firm 2 months earlier. Judge Anderson sat separately with his own legal team, maintaining physical distance from my father even though they were co-defendants. Even now, they were trying to save themselves. The prosecutor, Elizabeth Chen, was a woman in her 40s with a reputation for meticulous preparation and devastating cross-examinations. She didn't waste time with flowery opening statements. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this case is about abuse of power. It's about 2 men who use their positions of trust, one as a military legal advisor, the other as a federal judge, to manipulate, intimidate, and destroy anyone who stood in their way." She clicked a remote, and an image appeared on the screen, my mother's Air Force portrait. "This is Captain Lauren Clark, a decorated intelligence officer who served her country with distinction. In 1996, she witnessed illegal surveillance activities conducted by the defendants. She documented their actions carefully, thoroughly, because she understood that one day someone would need proof." Another click. Daniel Pierce's photograph appeared. "This is Daniel Pierce, an activist who discovered the same illegal activities and threatened to go public. 3 days later, he died in what was ruled a car accident. But Captain Clark's documentation suggests it was something far more sinister." The jury leaned forward, captivated. Elizabeth continued for another hour, laying out the timeline, the evidence, the pattern of corruption that spanned 3 decades. When she finished, the defense attorneys tried to spin their narrative. "These are patriotic men who served their country during difficult times," my father's attorney argued. "Decisions made under national security protocols cannot be judged with 20/20 hindsight." But the evidence was overwhelming. The trial lasted 6 weeks. I attended every day, watching witness after witness testify. Rebecca Walsh described the Operation Winter Dawn surveillance program and the unauthorized expansions the defendants implemented. Travis Kent corroborated The timeline with military records and personal observations. Joyce, the court clerk, testified about the ex parte communications she'd witnessed between my father and Judge Anderson. Maria Gonzalez described losing custody of her daughter in a case where every ruling defied legal precedent. And then, in week 4, I was called to testify. I walked to the stand with my mother's journal clutched in my hands. Elizabeth Chen approached with a gentle expression. Miss Clark, can you identify this document? This is my mother's journal. She kept it during her time in the Air Force and continued writing in it for years afterward. Can you read the entry dated August 4th, 1996? I opened to the page I'd read 100 times. Daniel Pierce threatened to go public. They called it an unfortunate accident when his car went off the road. I know what I saw in the logs. The courtroom was silent. What logs was your mother referring to? Surveillance logs showing that Daniel Pierce's communications were being monitored illegally, that his movements were being tracked, that the defendants knew where he would be on the night his car went off the road. My father's attorney objected. This is hearsay and speculation. It's a contemporaneous journal entry, Elizabeth countered. Admissible under the state of mind exception. The judge allowed it. For the next 2 hours, I walked the jury through my mother's documentation. The dates, the meetings, the pattern of corruption that destroyed lives and protected the guilty. When I finished, I looked directly at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The most dramatic moment came during Elizabeth Chen's cross-examination of Judge Anderson. She'd systematically dismantled his defense for 3 days. But she'd saved her best for last. Judge Anderson, you testified that you have no recollection of the Operation Winter Dawn surveillance program. Is that correct? That's correct. So you don't remember working alongside Richard Clark as a JAG officer in 1996? I remember working with many attorneys during that time. Elizabeth clicked her remote. A photograph appeared on the screen, the same one I'd found in my mother's chest. My father and Judge Anderson, arms draped over each other's shoulders, standing beside surveillance equipment. Do you remember this photograph being taken? Anderson's face went pale. That was a long time ago. The metadata on this photograph shows it was taken on June 15th, 1996. 3 days after Captain Lauren Clark documented illegal surveillance of Senator Gardner's daughter. Do you remember that operation, Judge Anderson? I don't recall. You don't recall? Let me refresh your memory. Elizabeth pulled out a document. This is an email you sent to Richard Clark on June 18th, 1996. It reads, Gardner is cooperating. The pressure on his daughter worked perfectly. This opens doors for both of us. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Judge Anderson, Elizabeth pressed, does this email refresh your recollection about your participation in illegal surveillance activities? Anderson's attorney called for a recess, but the damage was done. The closing arguments came in week 6. Elizabeth Chen stood before the jury with quiet intensity. These defendants will ask you to believe that they were simply doing their jobs. Following orders, making difficult decisions in complicated times. She paused. But the evidence shows something different. It shows men who saw an opportunity to gain power and took it, regardless of who they hurt. It shows a pattern of intimidation, manipulation, and corruption that lasted 30 years. She held up my mother's journal. Captain Lauren Clark risked everything to document the truth. She knew that powerful men would try to bury it. She knew they would threaten her, silence her, destroy her life. And they did. Elizabeth's voice grew stronger. But she also knew that truth doesn't stay buried forever. She knew that one day, someone brave enough would bring it into the light. And her daughter did exactly that. She looked at the jury. This is your chance to send a message that no one, not lawyers, not judges, not anyone, is above the law. Your chance to give Captain Lauren Clark the justice she deserved. Your chance to honor the memory of Daniel Pierce and every other victim of these men's corruption. She sat down. The defense made their arguments. But they rang hollow after everything the jury had heard. Deliberations lasted 3 days. I was sitting in Sophia's office when the call came. Verdict's in, she said, grabbing her coat. We ran to the courthouse. The courtroom was packed. Catherine Pierce sat beside me, gripping my hand. The jury filed in. I couldn't read their faces. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. On the count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, how do you find the defendant, Richard Clark? Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom. On the count of obstruction of justice, how do you find the defendant, Richard Clark? Guilty. 3 more guilty verdicts followed. Then Judge Anderson's charges. Guilty. 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 The courtroom erupted in applause and tears. Catherine Pierce sobbed beside me, clutching her son's photograph. I felt Sophia's arm around my shoulders, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak. All I could think about was my mother, about everything she'd sacrificed to make this moment possible. Sentencing came 2 months later. My father received 8 years in federal prison. Judge Anderson received 12, given his position of trust as a judge. Before they were led away, the judge allowed me to read a victim impact statement. I stood at the podium and unfolded the paper I'd written the night before. Your Honor, my name is Emma Clark. I'm the daughter of Lauren Clark, a woman who served her country with honor and died without seeing justice. I looked at my father. I'm not here to ask for harsh punishment. I'm here to make sure the record is clear about what these men did and why it matters. I took a breath. My mother lived in fear for decades. Fear that if she spoke the truth, I would be hurt. She sacrificed her reputation, her financial security, her peace of mind, all to protect me from these men's retaliation. My voice cracked. She died thinking they'd won, thinking the truth would stay buried. But she also made sure I'd have the tools to fight back when the time came. I held up her journal. This journal represents thousands of hours of careful documentation. Each entry is proof that my mother never stopped fighting, even when she had to fight in silence. I looked at Catherine Pierce in the gallery. Daniel Pierce deserved better. Maria Gonzalez deserved better. Every family destroyed by these men's corruption deserved better. Finally, I looked at the jury. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. Thank you for proving that truth still matters, that justice is still possible, that no one is above the law. I sat down. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The Lauren Clark Integrity Fund now occupies a full floor of office space in downtown Seattle. We have 12 full-time staff members, including 3 attorneys, 2 investigators, and a team of paralegals. We've helped 97 families navigate judicial corruption and ethics. Complaints. We've secured the removal of 2 additional judges who showed patterns of bias similar to Anderson's. We've lobbied successfully for new state legislation, requiring judges to disclose all financial relationships with attorneys who appear before them, and we've established a scholarship program for law students interested in judicial ethics and accountability. Mother's name is on the building. I still work as a public defender 3 days a week. I can't give up that work. It's where I learned to fight for people who have no one else in their corner. But I also run the fund with the same methodical determination my mother taught me. Sophia is now our legal director. Rebecca serves on our board. Travis trains our investigators on document analysis. And Catherine Pierce? She volunteers in our office every Tuesday, talking to families who've lost loved ones to suspicious circumstances that were never properly investigated. Her son's case was reopened last year based on my mother's documentation. New forensic analysis of his vehicle confirmed the brake lines had been tampered with. It's too late for criminal charges. Too many years have passed. But Catherine finally has official recognition that her son's death wasn't an accident. She says that's enough. Last month, I was invited to speak at the FBI Academy about documentation techniques for building corruption cases. As I stood before a room full of new agents, I held up my mother's journal. This, I said, is what changed everything. Not dramatic confrontations, not emotional speeches, just careful, consistent documentation of the truth. I showed them pages of her neat handwriting. My mother knew that powerful people count on victims staying silent. They count on evidence disappearing. They count on witnesses being too scared to come forward. I looked around the room. She proved that if you're patient enough, methodical enough, determined enough, the truth wins. My father was released on parole last week after serving 6 years. I haven't visited him in prison. Haven't taken his calls, but when he was released, he sent me a letter. I almost threw it away without reading it. Instead, I opened it. Emma, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I did to your mother, to you, to all those families, there's no excuse. No justification. I spent 6 years in prison thinking about the moment I made my first compromise. The moment I chose power over integrity. I told myself it was necessary, that everyone does it, that the ends justified the means, but they didn't. And I destroyed everything that mattered, trying to protect a lie. Your mother was twice the person I ever was. She had the courage to document the truth, even when it cost her everything. You have that same courage. I'm not asking for reconciliation. I just wanted you to know that I'm proud of what you've built, the fund, the work you do, the lives you've changed. Your mother would be proud, too. Dad, I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'll be ready to respond, but not today. This morning, I stood at my mother's grave with fresh flowers. The headstone has a new plaque beside it now, placed by the Air Force Captain Lauren Clark, USAF, 1991-1995. In recognition of distinguished service to country and courage in the face of corruption. I traced my fingers over the words. We did it, Mom, I whispered. Not just for us, but for everyone. The wind rustled through the trees. The fund helped 97 families this year. We exposed 2 more corrupt judges. We got new laws passed. We changed the system, piece by piece, exactly the way you taught me. I placed the flowers beside her headstone, and I finally understand what you meant in that letter. About fighting not just for justice, but for the life I deserve. I smiled through my tears. I'm living that life now, Mom. I'm happy. I'm fulfilled. I'm making a difference. A cardinal landed on the branch above me, its red feathers brilliant in the morning sun. I hope wherever you are, you can see what you started. How your courage rippled outward and changed so many lives. The cardinal sang once, then flew away. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the peace that had eluded me for so many years. Sometimes the most powerful form of revenge isn't dramatic confrontation or emotional outbursts. It's patient, methodical documentation of the truth. My mother spent years living in fear, carrying secrets that protected corrupt men at her own expense. But she never stopped fighting. She just fought quietly, carefully, strategically. She taught me that justice isn't always immediate, that sometimes you have to wait for the right moment, prepare the perfect case, and strike when your opponents least expect it. She taught me that powerful people count on victims staying silent, on evidence disappearing, on witnesses being too afraid to speak. And she taught me that if you're brave enough to document the truth and patient enough to wait for the right moment, eventually, the truth wins. 2 words changed everything in that courtroom. Winter dawn. But it wasn't the words themselves that held power. It was the 30 years of careful preparation behind them, the journal entries, the photographs, the meticulous timeline, the witness testimony, the undeniable pattern of corruption that my mother had documented with the precision of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She couldn't fight for herself, but she made sure I could fight for her. And in doing so, she taught me the most important lesson of my life. Integrity matters most when it costs something. Truth matters most when it's dangerous to speak. And justice matters most when it requires sacrifice. My mother sacrificed her reputation, her security, and her peace of mind to document the truth. I sacrificed financial security, career stability, and the comfort of ignorance to bring that truth into the light. But we won. Not just the legal case, but something bigger. We proved that no one is above the law. We proved that corruption can be exposed. No matter how powerful the people behind it, we proved that one person, armed with truth and determination, can change the system. And we proved that sometimes the greatest act of love is preparing someone else to finish the fight you started. My mother gave me everything I needed to win: the evidence, the strategy, the courage, and most importantly, the belief that justice is always worth fighting for, no matter how long it takes, the Lauren Clark Integrity Fund has helped 127 families expose judicial corruption and file successful ethics complaints. 3. Corrupt judges have been removed from the bench. New legislation requiring financial disclosure by judges has been adopted in 12 states. And the fight continues because truth always finds a way.